thank you for being here today. Sarah, Marzen, and I put together this session because we strongly believe in the power of education, and of course, our identity is that of biological physicists. So we combine both, and we are here today. Just as a general community guidelines, I'm going to read from the slide. We strive to foster a positive environment with respect for all participants as fellow scientists and educators. Please keep this in mind throughout our conversations, however we manage to establish them in this modality of webinar. Before we get started with our invited panelists, I want to highlight to our community of different outlets that we can use to share our work in relation to biological physics education. The first one is, of course, the session that we are hosting at the upcoming APS Global Summit, sorry. We have a session which is shown on the slide. We titled the session Teaching and Learning Biological Physics. And the good news is that a talk, an oral presentation for this session is considered to be non-technical. Therefore, it does not count against your allotted number of technical presentations. So in other words, just do it because it is a freebie for all of us. Another resource that I wanted to share is the Living Physics portal, which is a portal in which instructors deposit and get resources to teach primarily introductory physics courses for life sciences students. The third venue I want to highlight is the Biophysicist Journal, which is hosted by the Biophysical Society, and the journal welcomes any contribution in terms of education. Full disclosure, I am a member of the editorial board, so if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them about the journal. And lastly, I would like to highlight the Core Source repository, which is another digital environment to deposit and access resources to enhance our teaching. So the plan for today is that each of our panelists is going to introduce themselves. 1 minute, let's try to stick this time to 1 minute, please. And then we have put together 2 questions that will be addressed by our panelists. And after that, we will open to questions posed by the audience. So I want to introduce our panelists for today. In alphabetical order, I will invite first Rana.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much first for Patricia and Sarah for organizing the session. I'm really excited and honored to be on this panel with so many expert biophysics researchers and educators. I'm Rana Ashkar, an associate professor in the physics department at Virginia Tech. My lab is primarily experimental, and our major focus is on the elastic properties and organizational principles in lipid membranes as model systems of biological cells or cell membranes and artificial cells. We use a variety of techniques, including neutron scattering spectroscopy and optical microscopy methods. And our strength is in combining these techniques together to access a much extended length and time scale approach to study membranes and understand their hierarchical properties. Thank you.
Thank you, Rana. I will invite now Sonya.
Thanks so much. Thanks for the invitation to be on this panel. Sorry about the technical issues I had logging in a couple of minutes ago. So I'm Sonya Bahar. I'm professor of biophysics at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. And my group primarily works on collective dynamics in biological systems, looking at both neural synchronization and phase transitions in evolutionary dynamics. And we're mainly doing computational work right now, but we've also done in vivo imaging of neural synchronization in rats during focal neocortical seizures. Right now, we're mainly looking at population dynamics, and lineage structures in evolutionary problems in response to simulated mass extinction. So a range of different things, all dealing with collective dynamics in biological systems.
Thank you, Sonya. I will invite now Moumita.
Hello, my name is Moumita Dasgupta. I am an associate professor in the physics department in Augsburg University in Minneapolis. We are a primarily undergraduate institution, and I study biological and bio-inspired soft matter systems and to understand how living organisms through natural design principles are efficiently moving in complex environments and basically moving in the low and the intermediate Reynolds number regime. I come from a background in fluids, but currently our lab tries to, the current research is at the intersection of active matter, fluids, solid mechanics, and biological physics. Locomotion is kind of my hook, so I want to better understand diverse locomotory behavior of living systems across different length and time scales, and develop tools to contribute better understanding of these kind of systems. And some of our projects include building scaled up models of bacterial flagella to better understand how flagella bundle through hydrodynamic interactions, and also studying some individual and collective motion of self-propelled active systems like hex bugs, and studying their dependence on the nature of barriers on their timescales of passage for such active systems.
Thank you, Moumita. Simon?
Hello, I'm Simon Mochrie. I'm in the physics department at Yale University. I am currently working on chromatin organization and dynamics, and I'm interested especially at the moment in a project that seeks to figure out the motion of the chromatin polymer in real time in living cells using a combination of microscopy and machine learning.
Thank you, Simon. And Hugo?
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Sarah, for organizing this. And I'm Hugo Sanabria. I'm professor in Clemson University in the Department of Physics and Astronomy. My work uses single molecule methodologies, both from fluorescence and force spectroscopy techniques, to understand how basically determining models of the conformational dynamics of biomolecules under different perturbations, and we focus on proteins that regulate the nervous system, particularly synaptic plasticity or even neurodevelopment. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugo. Let's pose the first question for our panelists. Let's see who wants to contribute to this answer. And then let's let this conversation evolve organically. So the first question is, could you share one concrete example of how you have enriched or enhanced your teaching of biological physics, either at the undergraduate or at the graduate level? Do we have a volunteer?
I mean, I think it's hard to come up with just sort of one example, but I'll give it a shot. So one of the things that I do when I'm starting to teach introductory physics for pre-meds, which at Yale has a sort of a biological physics flavor, is to have the students build tensegritives, which are structures built out of cables and struts. And they're kind of cool little things that you can play with. They're a nice introduction to statics in introductory physics, but it's also fun to build them. So we build them as a sort of a warm up to the entire class.
That sounds super fun.
I wish I had one here, but we make them out of rubber bands and straws, and rubber bands self-destruct after a little while, and so they They're great gifts. They don't encumber anybody for a very long time. They disappear by falling to pieces.
Yeah, interesting. I probably want to hear from all panelists before we engage in a conversation. Do we have any other panelists who wants to share?
I'm happy to go next. All right, so in the spirit of kind of visualization to kind of improve learning, one of the things that I utilize the most in my class is the use of kind of live experiments to demonstrate some principles that I'm working on. These are kind of simple demos that I can bring into the class. A classic example of that is kind of teaching about diffusion principles. I like to bring Skittles with different colors and show how the colors diffuse differently with different temperatures. And that's kind of a direct visual description of how these processes work, which also allows me to kind of relate it to the theoretical underpinning of diffusional principles. Another thing that I like to do is also, if experiments in the classroom are not possible, then I find videos, animations, and molecular simulations to be incredibly helpful for students in terms of visualizing the concepts that we're working with, especially with biological systems, which tend to be so complex. You kind of have to break it down into kind of more manageable principles that can be related to physical concepts. And I have gotten feedback from my students that they find this very helpful.
Thank you, Rana. Hugo?
Hugo, you're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the elements that I introduce in undergraduate biophysics specific courses, and now we are expanding it to a more broader audience, is I wanted to know, because the people that take biophysics electives tend to come from different backgrounds. So I wanted to know how much students assimilate the concepts from biology and physics and how they're able to contribute and merge them together into what we call biological physics. So we basically got inspired from the force concept inventory, and we develop assessment tools that will merge both the knowledge in biology and the knowledge and concepts on physics to ask them these integrative questions. And because some people might be able to, if they're coming from more from the physical background, they might not know the mechanisms of the different molecules or different systems that we are talking in class. And that help us assess which topics we should recover. So we do a pre and post test. My pilot group actually turned out to be an REU group, an REU in biophysics. So we pilot the force concept inventory, and now we basically expanding it to go into the biology courses, the intro biology courses, and the intro physics courses for all the pre-meds and all the kind of the general people that take both biology and physics, and we'll basically monitor with the same assessment tool how they are able to not take this individualized teaching styles for disciplines, but say if they can converge later on in the integrating their knowledge and possibly spark their curiosity for biophysics.
Thank you, Hugo. Moumita?
Yeah. So one of the things that I have been working on is like Hugo said, like, you know, the biophysics group of people who come are like very interdisciplinary. So it's not only physics majors, it's also like for an undergraduate, small undergraduate institute where I teach, we also have like some chemistry folks and like some biology folks taking the classes. So keeping that audience in mind, and this is not introductory, this is like the biophysics class, which is intermediate. I've introduced these image processing toolbox for the students, which gives them some hands-on experience on using Python to do some image processing. And these students have not used, like all of them are not familiar. So, they have to be started with like a starter code and then these notebooks which walks them through different, starting with something very simple, like, introduction to pixels of like the data that they have taken, and then going on analyzing that, and then going on to like, more complicated things like, thresholding and like, doing intensity histograms and then comparing and then taking an example, like, we use a lipid monolayer example, like, because their domains are very clear. That's like a very good image processing exercise to use those images. And basically giving these students like these hands-on Python skills, which I don't think is covered in their curriculum otherwise. And they're also doing like, data analysis of data that they have taken in the lab, or like, biological images. And this is in alignment with like, there has been a push, like, because we have several folks working with Pickup, and they're trying, like, we are trying to have more computational stuff embedded in our curriculum, as well as, we are writing this up right now to include as lesson plans at the Living Physics portal so that it is, available to more wide group of people.
Thank you, Moumita. At this point, I'll probably invite the audience, or Sonya.
Oh yeah, I had one other example to throw in quickly as well. So I teach a senior level, beginning graduate level biophysics course, and what I usually do is, at least the last few times I've taught it, I start out the first half of the semester teaching from Phil Nelson's textbook. And then midway through, I switch to a range of current topics and kind of dig deep into some, hot areas that people are working on right now. I mean, both to, give the students an idea of the range of things that are out there, and to show students, what things are actually being worked on now. So they're not just reading about like the history of Brownian motion, but they're looking at, jamming transitions in embryonic tissue and things that people are doing, right now, and very, current topics, and to give them a range of the flavor of all the different things that you can do in biophysics, and biological physics. And I do kind of change that a bit depending on, what the students' interests are. And, if people are more interested in medical physics, maybe do a little bit more with bioimaging. And during COVID, we focused a bit more on the dynamics of epidemiology and the biophysics of viruses. So I kind of try to keep it topical. Yeah.
Thank you, Sonya. And I wasn't planning to skip you, but thank you. So at this point, in the spirit of having a conversation, a digital conversation, I will invite the audience to post questions on the chat based on the brief overviews provided by our panelists.
Patricia, if I can chime in while people are typing in their questions, and kind of to piggyback on Sonia's really interesting comment, is that students do get excited to feel or to know about what is happening in the latest discoveries in biophysics. And so one of the things that I do in my class is try to link some of the concepts that we have to kind of Nobel Prizes, or like these really exciting discoveries that are kind of widely known, and try to bring this back to some concepts that are covered in the class. And students really love learning about that, because they can see that there is a progression of knowledge from these very early discoveries all the way to modern time research. And this is something that they can bring into their presentations or final papers and so on and so forth. So it gets them excited to be part of this vibrant environment.
Yeah, definitely. I have a follow-up question, but I'm seeing a couple of comments on the chat. Phil Nelson agrees with Sonia and Rana. Yes, You're absolutely right. I guess the follow-up question is how you teach that in a sustainable manner, right? But that's a follow-up question. But I see here a question by Candice for Simon. Could you talk about how you integrate tensegrity into the introductory physics curriculum?
Sure. So one of the things we learn about in the introductory physics curriculum is forces. And so we'll calculate the forces and the vector. So the vector forces if you see I posted a photo of a tensegrity in the chat. If you look at that, there are straws and rubber bands, and the rubber bands exert a tension and the straws are under compression, and there has to be force balance at every vertex. And so we learn about vectors, how the vector force must balance at each vertex, and that gives rise to some sort of somewhat cool results, which is that if you make so the simplest tensegrity has got three straws and a rubber band at the top and rubber bands connecting the top and the bottom. But you can predict the angle of the bottom triangle that these straws make at the top and the rotation angle between the top triangle and the bottom triangle. So it's really a way to learn about vectors and a way to learn about statics. And the motivation for talking about tensegrities in a biophysics class or a pre-med class, which is where I actually talk about it, is that there's some story about how tensegrities are more representative of, let's say, the skeleton, the human skeleton, than are children's building blocks. And there's some idea that tensegrities have some relevance to cell mechanics, actin, and actin, I guess, is supposed to be under tension, and microtubules are supposed to be under compression. That's a point of view advanced by a fellow at Harvard who's in charge of that big institute, whose name eludes me for the minute, but somebody will know it. Ingba, thank you very much, Phil Nelson. Great person.
That sounds super interesting. I'm going to say something off the record. I don't know if we have any APS DBIO executive committee person in this session, but I think we should, at the Global Summit, right, in Colorado, we should have on-site building tensegrities. That'll be super fun, and we will attract more people to our community. I think so. I think we can do that. Yes, thank you, Phil. I want to move to our second question. And I'm really curious to see, oh, interesting. Probably you don't see the full question. This is very nice. I don't know why. Oh, okay, yeah. So this is the next question for our panelists. And again, let's follow the same logistics. I pose the question, we listen the answers, and then we open up for the audience. So looking a decade ahead, how do you envision the training of students in biological physics evolving over the next 10 years?
So I'm happy to start to give my point of view if you like.
Yes, please.
So one thing that I think I've noticed is so right now at my institution, there are students who come into the physics department to get physics PhDs, and they seem to be increasingly reluctant to take classes in, let's say, electromagnetism or advanced quantum mechanics. And so I think that biological physics may fission from physics, standalone physics, in the next 10 years. That's not something I necessarily think is a good idea, because I'm a crusty old guy, but I feel like that's something that might happen in the next 10 years. And so the upshot of that would be that biological physics would sort of move outside physics departments, or at least biological physicists would increasingly not get physics PhDs.
Okay, this is an interesting perspective. Thank you, Simon. I propose we hear from our panelists. First, Rana.
Yeah, I think it's a tough question, and I see Simon's point about the transition or changes that are happening. In fact, I've been teaching this for less than a decade, and I can already see changes in student preparation and students' willingness to take on kind of physics related questions or physics related derivations. So I think unless we adapt to this change, we might be risking biophysics being separated out of physics, which is something that would break my heart, because we fought so hard for biophysics to be at the interface of biology and physics. So one thing that at least I'm noticing in my classes is that students have more reluctance to take on kind of physics derivation questions or problems. They are more interested in understanding concepts a little bit more generally. But one thing that does seem to excite them is to model systems and to use simulations to address certain problems. So we might have to shift a little bit from the classic theoretical derivation for understanding physics to more perhaps simulation-based approaches that still have some of these physics foundations, but allow students to engage with problems more computationally, more visually. And unfortunately, there's not much that we can do at the college level, because this starts early on from the high school onward. And so I think this is a really tough question. This is something that as a community, I think we should be thinking about and how to address it going forward.
Thank you, Rana.
I'll just go off Rana's comment over there. I think, like, because of this reluctance, and also folks who are doing or coming to our class, especially, like, I can speak from, like, my undergraduate, intermediate classes, sometimes, talking about skills, or, like, which is more transferable, kind of gets them excited about doing biophysics. So I think using tools like AI tools that are available now, like, has made things easier. Like, you can do some things which took like a long time to do now, like was time intensive, that could be done in small period of time. And one of the example is like tracking, or doing tracking, or using tracking tools like DeepLabCut, or like AI-based tracking tools like DeepLabCut or Sleep. You can actually train a very small, high-speed data set, and then it gives pretty good prediction of like how the system is going to emerge and evolve. And that can give students the tool, and for us also to say that, okay, this is something new you are learning, which is cutting edge, which is transferable. You can use it doing in other things, and you are learning this as a part of your biophysics training. So yeah, I think that would be something.
Thank you, Moumita. Sonya.
Yeah, I can jump in, although I don't really have a clear answer, or necessarily a very cheerful answer. I mean, when I first saw this question, my first thought was, given the state of science funding, I'm kind of not very hopeful about the training of students in the next 10 years, but I want to, let's be positive. And I guess I see some of the concerns that people have been raising in terms of students, not wanting to do as much of the physics, and the possibility of some, biological physics training moving out of physics departments. But at the same time, I think I see kind of a movement back in the other direction, and a lot of movement back and forth across those boundaries between fields that really shouldn't be boundaries. And I think even for some of us, I mean, I think a lot of people here, today have probably, been in physics departments and been in other departments. And I think there is a lot of back and forth where you can be doing biological physics or biophysics, whatever you want to call it, and people can fight about the label, from a physics department, from a more bio perspective, from both, from one, one or the other. And I mean, just in my own career, I've been, I started it, as a physics major, then, did graduate work in a standalone biophysics department, and I'm now back in physics after postdocs all over, in many different places. So I think that a lot of us do kind of shift back and forth. And I can definitely see that happening maybe more for our students in the coming years. And while I share some of the worries about students not wanting to necessarily do the hard physics, I have a couple of really amazing undergrads working with me right now who really encourage me a lot because they're doing really well in their physics and mathematics courses. I have someone in math who's really interested in going into biophysics and computational physics and also learning bench work biology. And someone else who's a physics major and is very interested in neuroscience. And they're both very interested in doing computational modeling. So I don't know, I guess I envision a mixture of hope and worry, which is a very vague answer, but I guess, yeah, that's my honest answer to the question. I don't know. I think there's a lot of causes for concern, but a lot of causes for hope. That's sort of, yeah.
And I
Thank you,
am being
Sonya.
with a different perspective from an experimentalist that I've been always trying to encourage people to at least go and get their hands wet and go into the wet bench and try experiments. And of course, with the push of active learning, there's a window there that we can take advantage of lowering the barrier, the entry experiments to show those excited technologies that are winning Nobel Prizes that are in some cases available in the vicinity, and just decreasing the entry level experiment and show them what is possible. And I've seen that when I bring my students to the lab and show them what is possible, they on things that they never even consider, that's when it sparks their curiosity. And I feel like if we keep pushing towards more simulation or even AI, and we're gonna push them away from the bench, and we're gonna end up with non-experimental validation. And I think we need to catch ourselves in that balance, that we need both. And the way to go, just like is the lowering the entry for the simulations with AI helping on coding. I think we have to start doing the same thing on lowering the energy for experiments that can be simpler but enhance the experiments and the importance of the experiments.
Thank you, Hugo. And I like this balance of ideas, perspectives based on our background, our disciplinary research. I'm delighted with the discussion happening on the chat. I'll probably want to go through the comment post by Candice Edson. I'm going to read out loud. I have been wondering how much of this is related to the state of high school physics education as well as math teaching. Does anyone have any comments on this?
I think it's definitely related to that, although, I mean, scientifically to say that, I don't know that we have the p-value to show that it really is statistically significantly related to that, but I think a lot of students are coming in just not comfortable doing basic math, and so much of their undergraduate time is spent kind of in a struggle trying to catch up with that they're at a bit of a disadvantage, maybe compared to where some of us were, when we were undergrads.
Yeah, that probably is a much larger conversation that we can actually address in this session. I probably want to read the comment made by Josh Mercado. It is also challenging to find that balance because we want the students to be sufficiently versed in the math, but also make the connection to the concepts and vice versa. Any comments on that?
I think I can comment briefly on that. When I first started teaching biophysics, I was very comfortable giving kind of challenging questions, challenging concepts mathematically and conceptually to students to tackle. And they were, I mean, I was amazed by how much curiosity and motivation they have to address such challenging problems. Things changed after the pandemic, and I think we have to adjust to that. Otherwise, we lose a big section of kind of future scientists who might be intimidated by the fact that they don't have the preparation that is necessary to handle such problems. So while I completely agree that we want students to be mathematically versed, in my opinion, the more important thing is to convey the excitement of the topics that are covered in biophysics, how much of different fields they kind of tackle, and how much applications there is for these concepts in future career opportunities. And I think this is what gets students excited. This is where I was proposing that instead of relying so heavily on traditional theoretical concept or equation derivations, we can rely a little bit on maybe some simulations. And I totally agree with Hugo that introducing students to experimental work, even though it's in a class, is absolutely fantastic. This is one thing that I do in the classes that I teach, and it's a highlight the students have in every spot evaluation, every teaching evaluation that they give at the end of the semester. They like to see how these concepts relate to instrumentation, what techniques and what tools we can actually use to explore them, and to see this kind of real data and real implementation. So we kind of have to strike a balance, because we cannot fight with high school education. We cannot also fight with the change in education in general. We just have to adapt to make biophysics more exciting and more attractive to students.
Thank you, Rana, for your intervention. I see that when we talk about education, we really need to consider so many stakeholders in terms of a physicist, how many variables that we cannot control. So potentially focusing on the variables that we can actually tune and spark in the students that love for learning. I'm going to read another question that I see on the chat posed by Catherine. I'm going to read it loud. In the situations where people feel that students are unwilling to do the calculations, do you think that it is clear to the students how the calculations will lead to valuable insight that is worth pursuing? And if they lack skills, is there scaffolding to help them develop the skills, perhaps motivated by the value of the result? Would you have any insight on this question?
I could say something to that. And also, hi, Catherine. Good to not see you, but at least see your name. So I definitely think that we could, that's doable, maybe easier in a research setting. So it might be easier like to motivate a student by the value of the result. You know, if there's someone doing, working as a research student with you rather than in a classroom setting. I think it might be harder to do maybe in a classroom. I'm sure it could be done, but I can see motivating someone, to learn more, mathematical skills or computational skills, when they're doing a research project. So I could see easier ways to do that, but in the classroom, I'm sure we could, but it might be harder. I don't know.
I was thinking actually, so again, I work with like a lot of undergraduate students, we are a minority serving institution, so students coming to our classes are not very well prepared with the math to start with, and that gives, like, that affects the self-efficacy level, like right from the first year. So even if they are walking through, there is that gap that is being addressed. And I do agree that we need to scaffold, and biophysics is like an excellent place where that can happen, because like what we were talking about, like, there are these very tangible path-breaking research that's happening right now, which could be brought to classes and told, like, people are getting Nobel Prizes. And sometimes my students really surprise me by the amount of physics they can do with the math preparation they have, like, so I, like, I would think like that's a challenge for us as educators to be able to, scaffold things in a way that even if they're coming maybe with that little, like, less math preparation, but then we are scaffolding with examples and like more hands-on experiences, like Hugo was, mentioning about, where they still see the value of, like, the applications, even if they are not getting all the steps in the mathematical derivation. But yeah, I feel it poses a challenge for us to be more effective over there. Like there's an opportunity.
Let me follow up on what you just say, Moumita, and based on a comment posted on the chat by Catherine. She says, and connecting to Moumita's contribution, I'm going to read from the chat. I also think Hugo is absolutely correct if the value of the lab, and wonder if there are ways to use experimental methods or data analysis to motivate calculations. So, Hugo, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm curious if you have any comments.
No, yeah. So I take them to the lab and I use, simple statistical methods. So to show the statistics when we're doing photon counting. So the as simple as just doing some photon counting and seeing the different distributions that one can get and explain the statistics of those distributions. That is better than kind of the grid distributions on the board. Because they start seeing how the distributions pile up, and that's a very visual thing. Like they're just now realizing the importance of the math seen in real time. I also have used experimental data collected in the lab, or it can be also simulated data, just to kind of make more cases, and use them as part of projects. So they give them the data to analyze them and process them and trying to come up with different models that describe whatever the data I generated. So, and that connects them directly to experimental observation, whether it's synthetic data or not, but it's pointed directly to one set of experiments with one specific set of values and questions. So that gives them at least certain direction on what to look for, which I think sometimes is missing when we're only going through the math heavy parts, that they lose the direction and what am I doing all this for? And they lose the motivation. But if they know directly what's the motivation directly from the beginning, that pushes them further into, yes, I can do this and I can do this with even with advanced math.
Thank you, Hugo. I'm seeing a common theme here of emphasizing the excitement of the science, the excitement of the specifics of biological physics topics, as a means to engage the students into their physics learning. I see on the chat people are sharing different textbooks that they use, but I probably wanted to check a chat that I saw before. Okay, so here I see a contribution posed by Phil Nelson. I'm going to read it out loud, and I'm going to hear what panelists think about that. Phil says, part of the problem is that mainstream physics education is way too focused on solving tough equations and should be more focused on qualitative ideas, face portraits, dimensional analysis, and so on. And we, in biological physics, can show some leadership to our colleagues. This comment seems to fit a lot with the contributions from our panelists. The question is, how? How could we make that happen? Do you want to think about it? Like, Sonia.
I mean, I think that training students, I mean, if they're in a physics department, I think some of that training to do the tough equations, I think is probably very good training, but thinking big picture is also really important. And sometimes students can get so stuck in the weeds of trying to solve the tough equations, which can also be stressful and depressing if they're having trouble with that, that then they both get turned off from science possibly, and also don't develop the facility in the big picture thinking that you would have from looking at qualitative concepts and face portraits and that sort of going back and forth between the very rigorous detail and the big picture is something that I think it's very hard for students, but it's so important for them to learn. And I guess I'm thinking more about how we could model that for our own students, and in terms of trying to push colleagues in that direction. I guess some of it that could be trickier depending on just the style of the interactions within a department. But maybe more interdisciplinary seminars within a department where people can see each other's style of work might help from that point of view. And that might lead to more discussions about what to put on a qualifying exam or something like that. I don't, that's not a very clear answer, but that's.
At an undergraduate level, we have been having some of these conversations, and one of the things that we have been discussing about is this idea of rewarding students, with asking questions, qualitative questions, and rewarding them, as much as they would get rewarded when they are solving an equation and doing the math, maybe putting some figures and then asking them to analyze those figures and come up with probably they have to learn some math skills to be able to analyze that thing, but they are learning that in the context of a problem rather than solving the math, which tends to put them off. So this idea of rewarding or grading, we have to move to a way where they think that qualitative understanding is equally an important thing, which can be not always they have to solve a lot of math to be able to then qualitatively understand something. And we have been having conversation interdepartment, cross departments, with chemistry, biology, how we can do that more effectively, especially also for our the college physics classes, which are service classes for biology, how that idea could be promoted, because students want to come, they want to get the equation, they want to plug and chug and get done. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you, Moumita. Rana?
Can I add to this? I think Moumita raised an excellent point, and I see that Catherine has a question that I'm going to try to address briefly in my response. So one thing that I think we need to do is kind of move away from that traditional evaluation style of having that physics has to be evaluated based on derivation, based on mathematical principles. And if you don't know that, then you're out of luck. So one thing that we can do is in assignment assignments that do require derivations, we can break those down in digestible pieces. So if a student misses part of the question, would not necessarily miss the entire question. Another thing that I do in my class is that I diversify their grades. I do have homework assignments that are based on derivations or simulations, but I also want them to learn concepts and to be excited about things. So I have one written exam, but the other two exams, I have one in the format of in-class presentations, where I group or team students up in a group to work together. And I teach an undergraduate/graduate course. So I like to pair undergraduate students with graduate students so they can learn together. They pick a topic that is something of their choice and they research it. And they have to research recent literature and come up with a presentation for the entire class, which gets them really excited. Another thing that I do is in the final, I give them an assignment, basically a final paper, where I give them a recent research, a recent publication, to kind of like keep them current, that is related to concepts that were covered in the class, and then they can research that topic in more detail and write it in their own words to form their final paper. So I think this diversification might help, especially in such interdisciplinary fields like biophysics. That's my personal opinion, of course.
Thank you, Rana. I'm taking notes.
One other thing to throw in, although this may be in some ways an easier way to maybe inspire students at the graduate level who are beginning to do research, but I think if we try to inspire students to take the approach of, there are these mysteries about the universe that you want to try to understand. Like, what tools do you need to do that? What do you need to learn in order to be able to crack this mystery? And then if students can take that approach, if I want to understand this thing about biological physics, there's this puzzle that I want to understand and I want to solve it by all means necessary, then they might start to see, a physics approach, a mathematical approach, a biological approach as something that they need to learn one way, learn one thing, learn another thing in order to be able to achieve this understanding they want to achieve. And that kind of is a big picture of what education is all about, and so if we could inspire students to maybe think more along those lines, that might help them to see how interdisciplinary science is done and how the rigorous mathematics can be useful, the benchwork biology can be useful, and try to put it all together. But again, that may be an easier approach to use with students who are beginning their graduate work and students who are in a classroom. That might be a little bit harder, because you could talk to them about that, but they aren't doing it as much, except maybe in smaller assignments, like some of the things that people have already been talking about. I don't know.
Yeah, so I see that we have like 3 different groups that we would like to target: the intro level students that Simon talked about, and then we have our upper level students that we want them to get exposed to emergent topics in biological physics, to techniques that we use in the wet lab. And then we have the third group, which is what Sonya just explained beautifully, right? Our undergraduate students, because they are the future scientists. They will be the next us. So how are we gonna train them to embrace this biological physics perspective? I know we are at the hour and 5 minutes, but I also see a comment on the chat. Is there any panelist that would like to make a short comment about what has just been posted on the chat?
I think we have a student question, which would be good for us to address. So it's just the last comment that was just made by Gargi W, I think.
Yes, I'm going to read the question so that everybody knows what is going on. So we have Gargi The reading says, I am a grad student from a structural engineering and continuum mechanics background. I am now pursuing research in biophysics. Sometimes, due to program rules, it is difficult to take courses across disciplines. Can we have crash courses to learn biophysics modeling better instead of crediting courses? I think a great crash course can be created if people from different disciplines come together and understand the different perspectives, creating a syllabus that directs perspectives useful for biophysics might come handy. Do we want someone to approach that comment?
So I could a little bit. I'm sure other people have a lot to say as well. But there are some bits of that are being done in like tutorials at DBIO and some online seminar series. But more of that, I think would be incredibly useful, particularly because like, I think some students are in situations and in environments where it's easy to cross boundaries and where they have mentors who are already crossing boundaries that can help them do that. But other students might be more siloed in situations where they just don't have the contact to, of the person they need to really reach in order to cross those boundaries. So I think this could be a longer term discussion. I think that would be, I think that's really important.
If I may add, I think workshops are ideal settings for this. I know that they tend to be more specialized. So for example, right now I'm actually doing a workshop on advanced fluorescence techniques, but it's attracting students, grad students, first year grad students that they wouldn't have this type of teachings or classes in their own curriculum. So providing these workshops by the community and that will help to train the next generation will be a way to facilitate that, because I know that within different institutions there are going to be these different barriers and not all institutions are made equal. And some places are going to be more rigid than others. And it's a fascinating question and topic, and I'm glad that it was posted because it's a current challenge. But I've seen it being done through workshops and gathering communities of affinity to specific topics, and that can gather that dissemination of knowledge that it tends to be very introductory to new concepts.
Patricia, if I may also suggest for people who might have missed your introductory slides about the resources that are available for biophysics teaching and learning, perhaps we can send those links to the list of attendees through APS, and maybe we can add also the resources that Sonya had suggested, both in terms of short courses and the biophysics seminar series.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you, Rana. Yeah. Yeah, I am kind of just a short comment on developing these workshops or mini sessions that are delivered by experts with a pedagogical twist in a format that disseminates across different institutions and different barriers. I definitely see that as a potential that we can definitely contribute. I think the biological physics community could certainly develop those types of resources. I wanted to make sure there is another question that changes a little bit, but I want to honor the contribution of the attendee. The name of the person is Haskell. I'm gonna read quickly the question. Could the panelists give examples of math concepts, techniques that you feel they need to be able to understand or use in your courses that the students are reluctant or unable to use. I strongly support the emphasis on conceptual physics courses as a prerequisite for biological physics courses.
So can I take that one on, at least to begin with? So I think that students don't understand diffusion as well as they should. And there are a number of interesting aspects of diffusion that provide for surprising results. So even steady state diffusion, sort of the prejudice is that a diffusive current that's driven by a concentration gradient to a cell should somehow scale like the radius of the cell squared, the area of the cell. But of course, that's not true. The diffusion current scales like the radius because it's a Laplacian problem, and we all know, at least we worked out one point in our lives, the capacitance is proportional. The capacitance of a spherical capacitor is proportional to its radius. So that's an example where I think a mathematical understanding gives you extra insight that you can't get from sort of hand waving. And I mean, I think that's one example. I think there are more advanced examples. So for example, one of the things that we study is chromatin inside a nucleus. And one would naively imagine that the concentration of that chromatin polymer is uniform across the nucleus, but it's not. There's a depletion close to the nuclear envelope because the entropy of a polymer is less near the surface. And so, to understand that, you solve the diffusion equation with an absorbing boundary condition. So these are some mathematical manifestations of diffusion that are very apparent if you can solve the diffusion equation and understand how that works, but that are not apparent from sort of physical intuition, I would say. So I think that's one example where you need some mathematical skills to really understand things properly. So that was my shot at that question.
Thank you, Sam. I know diffusion is challenging for our students. I have seen that. Sonia, I see that you are unmuted. Do you have a contribution?
I didn't have anything else to add. I just forgot to unmute myself for now. Sorry about that.
It's okay. I want to make sure that I'm going through the chat, and I want to make sure that we are addressing the questions posed by the audience. We are at the hour and 13 minutes. Is there any last minute question from the audience? Is there any last minute words of wisdom from our panelists?
Well, can I say something? So I have another
Please.
pitch for diffusion. So I think diffusion might be a route by which we get more biological physics into mainstream physics curricula, because everything that you learn about V equals IR, you can also learn about concentration difference equals diffusive conductance times diffusive current. Maybe I got Ohm's law wrong there, but you get the idea. And sort of the payoff for that is that that's why cells are the same size both for little worms and for blue whales. Is at least one can make that argument that the limiting fact is the diffusive conductance, and that's why you need a circulatory system when you go beyond a certain size. And so physics is really affecting the design of all creatures. There are some other examples of that too, like Murray's law, if you know what that is. That's a relationship between blood vessel radii that comes from thinking about fluid flow resistance. I'll shut up now.
So I'm saying that a paraphrasing could be diffusion is the way for us to diffuse through the other branches of physics, right? Bringing our examples from biological physics. Thank you, Simon. Any other word of wisdom from our panelists?
I just want to say that biophysics is a super, super exciting topic. And I strongly encourage people, students especially, to kind of explore things. There's so many resources online. There's so many fascinating animations and demonstrations of how important physics is in understanding biological systems, origins of life, evolution of life, and even like how cellular systems move and grow and respond to stimuli. So I just want to emphasize this point that I understand that it can be intimidating to join such two kind of drastically distinct fields into one topic. But I think the possibilities are limitless, and it's really a field for infinite creativity. And I hope that this is what attracts students to take biophysics classes and hopefully also engage in biophysics research.
Thank you, Rana.
Yeah, I just echo what Rana just said, and this may be again more for the senior undergrads and grad students, but just going to conferences, talking to people, listen to every single talk you can find, and ask people questions. Try to get people to be like informal mentors telling you about the field and different, possible options of research directions. So just the more connections you make, the more questions you ask, the more you'll see about the different ways that that you could explore, different possible directions. Yeah.
Thank you, Sonia. Moumita or Hugo?
Yeah, I would say from the undergraduate perspective, I get a lot of students wanting to do biophysics research coming from biology and chemistry, apart from our physics students. But I don't get those many students taking our classes. So, to be more accessible in a way, or teaching biophysics in a way that it is more accessible, not only like the introductory, but also maybe we need some help from math, on the math skills, but however, making biophysics more accessible at that undergraduate level so that it draws more people from other disciplines, which we have been successful doing for research. And those students thrive, they do very well in research. Probably if we can do that for our classes, that will be something good.
I guess I can echo what was said. One of the things that I love about this community is how interdisciplinary everything is and how welcoming it is. And I think that's something that gets modeled to the next generation of students, and they get attracted to this. Now, there's these intrinsic barriers on disciplines on how people choose the different paths, and not always they get exposed to the same training. So it's our responsibility to kind of bring them and show them that they're basically barriers to drop and be more inclusive on that end. And when I see the light bulbs of either someone that was trained more in biology, learning concepts in physics, or the other way around, that's the spark that I think it gets me going. And I think that's what we should aspire to look at it. And because they're going to be the next one carrying the torch, right? So I just and that's what I like about this community.
Thank you, Hugo, and everyone for their contribution. I see that we are on the hour and 20 minutes. I don't see more questions coming in the chat unless there is a last minute question. Probably something that I would like to say is how much I appreciate the passion that our panelists have for biological physics. Definitely the beauty and the power of combining physical sciences way of thinking with biologically inspired questions is of the greatest intellectual challenge and joy for me. One of the questions that I have for myself, and there is no need to have an answer, but one of the questions is, as we think how we want our students to learn biological physics, do we feel that as a community we are at the stage of doing biological physics education research? Are we at that stage, or are we at perhaps the previous level of let's be reflective practitioners? And either way is fine, of course. Part of the motivation here is, if we think of the next 10 years, right? What are the questions that we would like biological physics education research address, so that we have our students being served by the answers that we could figure out. As everybody can see on the slides, we have places to share resources. I hope everyone can contribute to the session that we are having at the APS Global Summit in 2026. Everybody can contribute to an educational session. This is a non-technical presentation, so it doesn't count against you, and everybody is welcome to share their perspective, their experience. I see a comment on the chat by Vernita. Yes, I agree with you. I'm going to read out loud. Starting subdisciplinary education research without pre-existing materials and validated measures is a heavy, heavy lift. I absolutely agree with you. I'm just posing the question, which I think this is what these venues are for, kind of sparking ideas and see what actually gels into action. With that, I probably would like to say thank you to everyone for being here on this exchange of ideas. I hope you got a lot to think about, and I hope to see everyone at the Global Summit in Denver, Colorado in March 2026. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.